You have probably been in a meeting where someone would not stop talking, and the longer they spoke, the less anyone listened. Eyes glazed over, phones came out, people mentally checked out while nodding politely. Here's the strange part. That person thought they were making an impression. They thought more words meant more impact. They were wrong. If you have ever dominated a conversation hoping to seem knowledgeable, hoping to establish yourself, you may have done the exact same damage to your own presence. This is the presence shift, where we decode the invisible signals that determine who commands the room and who gets ignored. By the end of this video, you will understand the neurological reason why your brain literally stops processing speech after a certain point. You will learn why talking more actually helped you become a leader, but destroys your authority once you have it. And you will discover the internal shift that separates people who get heard from people who get tuned out. Here is what happens when someone speaks continuously. Researchers call it neural habituation. Your brain is designed to respond to novelty. When a new voice starts speaking, your auditory cortex fires up, attention locks in. But within seconds of continuous, unchanging input, something shifts. The brain begins reducing its response. The same neurons that activated with excitement now barely flicker. This is not a choice. It is automatic. Your nervous system evolved to prioritize new information, not repetition. Studies on attention during lectures found that mind wandering increases, and memory for content decreases the longer someone speaks without variation. The brain is not lazy, it is efficient. If input becomes predictable, it stops allocating resources. But here is where it gets more interesting. There's a phenomenon called the Babel hypothesis. Research spanning 70 years consistently shows that speaking quantity, not quality, predicts who emerges as a leader. The person who talks more in a group setting is more likely to be seen as the leader, regardless of whether their ideas are actually better. This works through psychological shortcuts. The mere exposure effect makes us favor voices we hear more often. A confidence heuristic makes us assume that someone speaking freely must know what they are talking about. And crowding out means dominant speakers simply leave no room for competitors. So talking more helps you rise, until it does not. Once you have established status, the dynamic reverses. Researchers call this counter-signaling. The newly wealthy flaunt their money. The old rich find such displays embarrassing. Established power signals itself through restraint. When you have nothing to prove, you do not need to prove anything. This is the trap. The behavior that got you noticed becomes the behavior that makes people dismiss you. Speaking more worked when you were establishing yourself. It undermines you once you have arrived. And there is a cost beyond attention. Social psychologists have identified two dimensions that explain 82% of how we judge others: warmth and competence. Dominant speech signals competence but damages warmth. And warmth is assessed first because our brains need to determine friend or foe before anything else. When you dominate a conversation, you may seem capable, but you also seem cold. People listen to those they trust. Trust requires warmth. So what is the shift? High presence individuals do not avoid speaking. They speak with strategic weight. They understand that silence creates scarcity. When words are rare, each one carries more impact. Research shows that 2 to 3 second pauses after key points increase audience recall by approximately 20%. Pauses create what neuroscientists call orienting responses. The brain snaps back to attention. Something has changed. Something must be important. But this is not about technique. It is not about counting seconds between sentences. The person who pauses strategically from an anxious state looks awkward. The pause must come from an internal state of sufficiency. You pause because you're not rushing to fill silence. You're not afraid of the space. You trust that what you have said has landed and you do not need to pile more words on top. This is the internal shift. Anxious speakers talk to convince themselves they belong. Present speakers have already decided they belong. The talking is secondary. Think about your last important conversation. Did you speak to fill silence or to add value? Did your words come from a place of proving yourself or a place of contributing? The nervous system state underneath determines how your speech lands, regardless of what you actually say. The practice is not about speaking less as a rule. It is about recognizing what drives the impulse to speak more. If that impulse comes from anxiety, from a need to prove, from fear of being overlooked, your speech will carry that energy, and people will tune out, not because your words are wrong, but because your state is broadcasting insecurity. The shift happens when you speak from completion rather than need, when your words are an offering, not a plea, when you trust silence as much as speech. Presence is not performed, it is rewired. The shift has already begun. If you want to understand the deeper psychology of how people judge your status before you even open your mouth, subscribe. The next video reveals the signals you are broadcasting in the first 100 milliseconds.